Welcome back, Chapter 9. Growing up, Eliza and I had always been early risers. It was hard to sleep in when your father got up at the crack of dawn, slamming drawers and whistling his way down the stairs, hollering that the coffee was ready in a voice meant to carry. Waking up before my alarm was a habit that had stuck, and it served me well in a profession where I was expected to work when a lot of people were still hitting the snooze button. But back here in my childhood home, my dad no longer rose with the sun. I can hear his deep snores every morning as I made my way downstairs to start the coffee. Today, I was a little bleary-eyed even after my first cup of coffee. I hadn't slept well, a hazard of returning to Ludlow, I discovered, and I was hoping caffeine might help clear my mind. Dean and I had plans to meet up, and I was eager to get moving, wondering if today might be the day we made some progress. I threw on jeans and a t-shirt, reached into my closet for a hoodie, and stopped. Eyes rising to the shoebox on the high shelf. Blood whooshed in my ears, my heart beat hard and heavy in my throat. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever, so this time I forced myself to reach up and pull the box down. I sat on the edge of my bed and took off the lid, fingers sifting through paper. After the murders, I received emails and cards and a few actual letters. Many from people I knew, some from strangers outside of Ludlow. Most were kind, wishing my family well, expressing condolences, hoping for justice. But some were nasty and cruel, saying Eliza and Travis deserved what happened to them, or suggesting that perhaps my fucking the random author of the missive might help heal my pain. I printed out most of the emails, even the horrible ones, folded them carefully, and put them in this box. Same with the cards and letters. I didn't know why, but it had felt important to keep them. On bad days in the months after Eliza died, when I could hardly force myself out of bed, I reread the most hateful ones, a necessary twisting of the knife. A necessary twisting of the knife. The pain offered a strange type of release. I thumbed through the pile, eyes catching a word here and there. Sorry, great girl, nice ass, anything we can do, whore, much love. But I didn't stop to read. I was looking for something in particular, and my fingers slowed when I glimpsed a flash of red. I pulled it out, pinched between my thumbs and pointer finger, stomach doing a slow forward roll. It was a heart cut from red construction paper, uneven, like a child might craft in grade school, and backed with a white dolly, clumps of dry glue oozing from the edges. In the center, block letters written with thick black marker. I did it. I turned the heart over, already knowing what was on the back. Same lettering, same markers. For you. I did it for you. My palms were slick and greasy suddenly, and I dropped the heart, let it flutter onto the bedspread next to me. All these years later, I had still been able to close my eyes and visualize it from memory. Every detail seared into my brain, but it was something else to touch it again, to feel the glide of paper against my skin. I remember clearly the moment I'd first seen it, stumbling downstairs before dawn, unable to sleep. A splash of red on the wood floor by my front door. Someone had shoved it through our mail slot in the night, exactly 1 month after Eliza's death. I stood there in the foyer, flipping it back and forth, trying to decipher what should have been 5 simple words. I did it for you. The heart had confirmed my worst suspicions, the ones that had kept me up at night and landed me in a therapist's office. When the heart had been pushed through our mail slot, Roy had been miles away, locked up tight in prison. He couldn't have delivered the heart, which meant he hadn't acted alone. Someone else had been involved in the murders. But the heart had also stopped my questions, quieted my voice just when I finally had some proof that I wasn't crazy. It hadn't been the therapist, my parents' tears and pleading, or Baker's pity. It hadn't been Cassie or Ryan's loyal, careful understanding that almost more painful than disbelief. No, it had been the message on the heart that had finally rendered me mute. The knowledge that somehow Eliza's death was my fault, even if I didn't fully understand how or why. Guilt, a muzzle that kept me silent all these years. I picked up the heart, smoothed it between my fingers. I did it for you. It sat coiled and alive in my hand. I swore I could almost feel it beating. Whoa. Dean had texted me early when my hands were still shaking around my cup of coffee and asked if I could pick him up this time because his SUV had a flat. I'd responded that I didn't mind, glad to have a task, something to focus on instead of a heart tucked back into the shoebox inside my closet, seething in the darkness. But when I told Dean I could drive, I hadn't pictured actually having to walk up his grandma's cracked front sidewalk and knock on her door. I envisioned something more clandestine, but clearly Dean wasn't as worried about being seen together as I was. I was surprised again when it was Virginia Matthews who answered the front door at my knock. She was still dressed in her housecoat and slippers, her permed hair flat to her skull on one side. "Hi," I said, giving an attentive wave. "Is Dean here?" Yes, she said, shuffling back and motioning me inside. "Come in. Let me pour you an orange juice." "Oh, no, that's okay," I said. "I can wait." But she was already walking away from me, one hand out to steady herself against the narrow hallway wall, and I didn't have much choice but to follow. She led me into the kitchen, a small, cramped room that caught all the late morning sunshine, making it feel warm and close even though the air outside was mild. The entire space felt like a dollhouse, way too petite to have once housed 2 teenage boys. I wonder if all the rooms were like this. Picture Dean growing up in a bedroom where he could stand in the middle and touch 2 walls with outstretched arms. Had to hunch over to keep his head from hitting the ceiling. His grandma had already put a pitcher of orange juice on a tiny table tucked against the wall, 3 flower-painted glasses at the ready next to it. She motioned for me to have a seat and then poured me a drink with a shaky hand. I took a sip, expecting her to sit next to me, but she remained standing. She gnarled her fingers. Whoa. Her gnarled fingers clapped in front of her. When Dean told me you two had run into each other and finally talked, I was so glad, especially when he said you'd be coming by this morning. "I've always wanted to tell you how sorry I am," she said, voice quiet. "All these years I've wanted to say it." I set down my glass, pressed my hands flat on the worn wooden tabletop. I hadn't been sure she knew who I was, even with an up-close look this time. I would have been happier if she hadn't recognized me, if we could have left it alone. "Thank you," I managed. She wrung her hands together as if my acknowledgement of her words had somehow upset her. I should have written a note, but Roy's lawyer told me I couldn't. After the trial, I started to write 100 times, but I'd think about you and your poor parents and I'd freeze up. Couldn't think of a single word that came out right. "It's okay," I said. "I know it wasn't your fault." These were the words I was supposed to say, the ones that would bring an old woman some comfort. She sat down across from me, finally, let out a weary sigh. "You're kind to say that, but I think it probably was at least partly my fault. I raised him, didn't I? Somewhere along the line, I did wrong by him, didn't teach him how to treat people." Tears gathered in her eyes, and she swiped at them with trembling fingers. "That's not true," Dean Sanford said from the doorway, and at the sound of his voice, his grandma's face broke into a smile. "You raised me, didn't you?" he went on, coming up behind her and resting his hands gently on her shoulders. "And I've turned out okay." Virginia let out a little laugh, reached up and patted his hand. "You've turned out just fine." But it was clear from the look on her face that Dean had done more than turn out fine. He hung the moon and the stars. "Here," she said, pointing at the empty chair. "Sit down and have some orange juice with us." Dean looked at me, mouth sorry over his grandma's head before he took a seat as instructed. "What are you two getting up to today?" "What are you two getting up to today?" Virginia asked. "I still don't like the sound of this." I glanced at Dean, surprised he told her what we were doing, and he gave me a minuscule shake of his head. I told my grandmother how we retraced Roy's steps that last summer to try to get a better idea of what he was thinking. He told her some of the truth, but not all of it. "Just don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong," Virginia said. "Leave the police unto the police." She paused, laid a hand on top of Dean's. "What happened to those kids, Dylan and Addie, had nothing to do with Roy. Not directly." The gentle tone of her voice told me this wasn't the first time they had this conversation. Dean slid his hand out from under his grandma's, avoiding eye contact with both of us. "Don't worry," he told her. "We're just going to talk to Libby." Virginia made a dismissive cluck. "Nothing but trouble, that one. You'd be wise to steer clear." She looked at me. "Did I offer you a drink?" "Yes," I said, holding my glass a little. "You did, thanks." She blinked at me, her face wiped clean for the span of a few seconds before she came back to herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "I forget things these days." "It's okay, Graham," Dean said, standing and reaching for her hand. "Why don't you go take a rest? I'll be back this afternoon, and I can help you make the grocery list." I watched Dean lead her toward the doorway, one hand resting carefully on her back, and marveled at his patience. "Oh, wait," Virginia said, putting a hand out against the door jamb as she turned to look at both of us. "If you're trying to figure out what Roy was thinking those last months, you might want to talk to that girl he was seeing." Dean sighed. "Yeah, Libby. We're going to talk to her today." Virginia shook her head. "No, not her, the other one." "What other one?" I asked, my heart suddenly beating double time. Virginia's face tightened with effort and she closed her eyes. "I never met her. Saw her in his truck once, or maybe twice." She opened her eyes. "She had a ponytail." "That was Libby, Graham." The confusion on Virginia's face was heartbreaking. The look of a child who doesn't understand what's happening to her. "It was?" "Pretty sure," Dean said. "Now let's get you to bed." I followed him back down the hall and let myself out onto the front porch to wait, desperate to be free of that too small space. I leaned back against the side of the house and closed my eyes, took a deep breath of fresh air, and willed my mind to quit. "Ready?" Dean asked a few minutes later, the screen door closing gently behind him, and I opened my eyes and gave him a nod. "Sorry about that," he said once he was buckled into my car and easing down the driveway. She gets confused nowadays. I worry about leaving her alone, but we can't afford anyone to take care of her." I put my foot on the brake and turned to look at him. "Have you always lived here with her?" "I moved out for a few years after I graduated. Had a little apartment. Shithole, really. But it was a space that was all mine. After the murders, when people started harassing her and driving by at all hours throwing crap at the house, I moved back. Been here ever since. 33 years old and still living at home. How pathetic is that?" You're good to her, I said. Dean shook his head. I think about leaving at least once a day. Imagine packing up my shit, getting in my car and driving away, making her somebody else's problem, doing the exact same thing my mom did to us all those years ago. I've hated my mom for it every day since she left, and lately all I feel is envious. When he glanced at me, his eyes were exhausted, and I wonder how long it had been since Dean Matthews had given himself a break. But you don't leave, I reminded him quietly. You stay. Yeah, he said, I stay. I started to lift my foot off the brake and pause. What did she mean about Dylan and Addie? Dean turned his head away from me to look out the passenger window, and I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I used to ask Roy why he did it, especially at the beginning, right after he was arrested. Practically begged him to tell me why, how, what had been going through his head, anything to make sense of it. But all he would say was that he pulled the trigger. It had been him. Beyond that, there was no steel door. And no matter how hard I banged on it, he wouldn't let me in. He paused. I wish for Addie and Dylan's sake that I pushed him harder. I stared at Dean, and just like at the vigil, pain breached the space between us. Our shared guilt, like a third body in the car, resting heavy hands on our shoulders. I was looking for answers, but Dean, I realized, was searching for absolution. If it helps, I said, I wish I stayed and listened to what Eliza wanted to tell me the night she died. I wish for that every single day. Dean scrubbed his face with one hand, letting out a frustrated growl. My grandma is wrong. Addie and Dylan's death have everything to do with Roy. I nodded without speaking, the heart hidden away in my closet, beating in my throat. It keeps me up at night, you know, he went on, thinking I could have stopped it somehow. He paused, let out a shuddering breath, worrying about whether it's going to happen again. My hands clenched the steering wheel, tentacle of ice twining around my stomach and lungs as my gaze flew to Dean's. You think it's going to happen again? I don't know, he said, somber eyes on mine. I don't know anything, and that's what scares me. It took us a little longer to find Libby than we originally anticipated. Turned out she no longer worked at the Mexican restaurant where Dean had run into her last, and no one answered our repeated knocks at her last known address, a rundown motel converted into apartments on the edge of Neosho. We were about to give up when the door to the apartment next door opened and a woman in a bikini top and cut-off jean shorts leaned out. Just looking at her made me shiver. Jesus Christ, she said. You gonna keep up that racket all fucking day? Haven't you got the message yet? She's not home. Know where she is? Dean asked. If I did, wouldn't be any business of yours, would it? The woman smirked at him, gave me a dismissive glance. What you want her for anyway? Need to talk to her. We're not looking to cause her any trouble. Can't help you. Sorry, she said, sounding anything but. Dean took a step closer, pulled off his sunglasses, and put on a grin instead. Aw, come on now, he said, working his drawl in a way I've never heard before. This is Neosho, not New York. I can track her down easy enough. But are you really going to make me work that hard? Dean's smile apparently did the trick because the woman's arms uncrossed and her body loosened. One hip jutted forward. Oh, I don't know, she said. You look like you can handle it. I could tell the laugh Dean let out was fake, even if she couldn't. It was jarring how quickly he can put on this new persona, like slipping into a familiar skin. He leaned a little closer, shoulders balanced on the door jamb. You gonna help me out or what? Okay, fine. But you didn't hear it from me, the woman said around her grin. She's working at the laundromat over off of Wilson, the 8 to 5 shift. My lips are sealed, Dean said. Thanks. No problem, the woman said, lingering where before she'd been ready to slam her door in our faces. Maybe I'll see you around? Maybe. Dean gave her a little salute with 2 fingers. He waited until we were halfway across the parking lot before he glanced at me. What? Nothing, I said, shaking my head. You just knew exactly how to get to her, didn't you? It wasn't any special trick. He moved away from me to get to the passenger side of the car. I'm pretty sure everybody knows how to play nice to get what they need. I slowed, watching him open the door and slide into my car. Through the glare of the sun off the windshield, I could no longer see his face, only the outline of his body. The impatient tap of his fingers against his knees, playing nice to get what he wanted. Was that what we were both doing right now with each other? Maybe. Because I knew that underneath all my recent bullshit about forgiving Roy's family, a pocket of resentment and anger and misplaced blame still lived, no matter how hard I tried to stomp it flat. I had to assume Dean carried the same hidden pocket inside himself, one that looked at me and my family and imagined us celebrating the death of his brother, high-fiving and popping champagne, while Roy's heart stopped under the glare of fluorescent lights. I couldn't fault Dean, and maybe it didn't matter. Maybe none of it mattered, so long as we both got what we needed in the end. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 9. Is there much to say about this chapter? Is Dean still on my suspect list? He is. He's still on my suspect list. Okay, so his grandmother got dementia. But was there another girlfriend? You know how like some of the times dementia patients be telling the truth, right? And then Dean tried to shut her up about it. Do Dean know something that he's not telling Greer? Okay, I'm going to have to see y'all in the next chapter. Bye for now.